I wake up in my younger body, God knows where. Then what?
You'll need to go to my house and find me. Convince me of all of this.
You'll need me as well.
What?
It's going to take the two of us, side by side at a time when we couldn't be further apart.
You'll have to be patient.
Patience is my strongest suit.
Basically, your body will go to sleep while your mind travels back in time. As long as you're back there, past and present will continue to coexist.
You really think this will work?
I have faith in him.
And that was a clip from X-Men Days of Future Past. Delighted to say we've been joined by Sir Patrick Stewart. Sir Patrick, hello.
Good morning, Simon.
How are you, sir?
I'm actually a bit zombie-like this morning, having flown in from New York yesterday after a 5 a.m. start to the day. But I can put all that behind me now that I hear your voice.
Well, the feeling is mutual then. Though I have to say, I remember, even if you might not, an interview that I did with you, and it was in a live studio, and I got a coughing fit, and I had to leave the studio. And you carried on answering the question. I found a glass of water, had a glass of water, came back into the studio, and you were still answering the same question. And you could have said anything.
Yes, I remember it's the first time I've actually driven an interviewer out of the studio.
I'll try and do slightly better with this one. So, in the time that we have, tell us where we are then in this extraordinary story with Charles Xavier and where you fit in. What do we need to know before we see this film?
Well, Simon, we're in an extremely dark place because none of the other X-Men movies have found us not just mutant kind, but humankind facing the apparently unanswerable threat of the opposition in this film, and which is why Magneto and Xavier join forces. I don't think I'm giving away anything there, in order to combat these machines who are threatening all life on the planet. And it represents for Xavier a significant turn because he has always been a negotiator, a diplomat, always wanting to try to find a peaceful, non-violent solution to the issues. Usually it's the fundamental issue of mutant kind. But now he has accepted the fact that combat is the only way forward and that something extreme has to be done. That's where the movie begins, right at that point.
And it's Wolverine who we follow, because it's Wolverine that goes back in time to try and sort out this issue. But it's sort of it's your story, isn't it? You and James McAvoy. It's your story from the druggy dropout, the James McAvoy version, to the calm, wise version that he becomes.
Yes, Wolverine is the only one of the X-Men who, because he has this capacity to heal himself, will survive this transference of his consciousness back in time, some 40-odd years. And it requires him to contact the younger Charles Xavier and to put him on a path, a course which it appears he is unable to take, so that history can be changed. It's not an absolutely original novel idea, going back in time to fix something so that something in the future will be different. I think I may have done it a couple of times on Star Trek. But here it's very, very potent and very, very effective, because of the condition that we find Charles Xavier in. And what is a remarkable performance from James McAvoy, who has so many of the elements of what Xavier is to become, but is also a kind of lost soul when we encounter him. And the same goes for Michael Fassbender as Eric Lenscher, the Magneto character.
The scene that you have with James McAvoy, which I think I'm right in saying was your last day of filming and James McAvoy's first day of filming, is a fantastic moment in the film, though, isn't it?
Well, it's rare that an older and younger self are brought eyeball to eyeball as we are in this film, especially when the older one has to tell the younger one exactly what he must do and how his life has to change, not just for his own good, but for the future of all humankind.
And as ever, this X-Men story tied to real events. Can you just explain a bit about the ending of the Vietnam War and how that ties into the story?
Yes, we're in the 70s, and there is a man called Bolivar Trask, again, brilliantly played by Peter Dinklage.
It's fantastic, isn't
it is one of the extraordinary things about this cast. At the world premiere on Saturday night in New York, I think there were approximately 20 actors on the stage. We were missing Ian McKellen and we were missing Halle Berry. But I can't think, not even in the Ocean's 11 series has there been such an assemblage of international actors. I think we have 7 different nationalities in this film. So a man called Bolivar Trask, who is a scientist, has come up with a way of assuring the world that events like the Vietnam War will never, ever happen again, because he has created something which will be able to effectively deal with all threats anywhere, however, in the world. But unfortunately, his ulterior motive is one of world domination for himself and for his kind.
When you go through the cast list, and you mentioned some of the extraordinary characters assembled for X-Men, I was talking to James McAvoy about this, and he was saying his filming experience on this is remarkable for the lack of ego. And when you watch the film, you think, I bet you guys had a great time. And when you watch all of you doing the promotion, it doesn't matter whether it's you or Hugh Jackman or James McAvoy, Jennifer Lawrence, you seem to have had a blast. Is that your experience? Because it looks as though you're having the time of your lives.
Well, I've heard James say that, and he's very entertaining and articulate about it. But in fact, I think there were 2 very different atmospheres on the set. The one that surrounded the first weeks of filming, which was that concerning Magneto, Charles Xavier, Kitty Pryde, yes, Wolverine also for a time, Bishop, and we were a rather kind of solemn, somewhat self-contained, rather at times solitary group. But the moment that we handed the baton to James and Michael Fassbender and Jennifer Lawrence, it was, I am told, a little like schools out. And I've heard tales of BB guns and all kinds of pranks and setups that they did. There has been, James is right, a complete absence of some of the self-centered egotism that you can find sometimes on movie sets.
And for people who are querying the fact that you're even in this film, the solution, I think I'm right in saying, is you have to stay, as a lot of people know, you have to stay to the end of the credits
Yes.
of every movie, because some people will be surprised that you're in it at all.
Yes, that's right. They will recall that I was vaporized by Jean Grey, an extremely uncomfortable experience, actually uncomfortable, in fact, in the shooting of it. And there would seem to be little hope of return from that. But those who stayed way beyond the minutes and minutes of credits would have found there was a little additional scene which planted a seed which suggested that Xavier might not be lost to us forever. And it was the same at the end of the last Wolverine movie, because that was a direct setup for Days of Future Past. And I'm afraid I fell victim to the credits shift, because I didn't stay to the end of this one, so I have not seen our tag at the end.
Well,
of this
I have.
movie.
Yeah, you sit through about 10 minutes of no animals were hurt in the making of this film, and so on, and then we get a little clip of which I think is X-Men Apocalypse. But I better not talk about it in case people get cross, because that's the whole point. Hey, I sat through the credits, so I think everybody else should.
Yes, it's curious how that is becoming very fashionable.
You've been quoted as saying that you had, when you were originally asked to play this role, you had an initial reluctance about becoming too associated with a character again. Were any of those fears well founded, or were you wrong?
They were not well founded, no. And in fact, I was persuaded of that by Bryan Singer, having expressed my reluctance about taking on Xavier. I had lunch with Bryan, and he assured me that in every sense this was going to be very, very different. And because each one of the films, although at that stage you don't think in terms of what has it been now, 7 films of a franchise, that there was a significant substance to all these movies, which would be the one thing that would make such a difference. And it proved to be true.
Before we finish, Sir Patrick, I just want to read you this, which was sent by a listener called Ben Wilson, who said, Simon, I was lucky enough to work with Sir Patrick when he ran a Shakespeare workshop with me and some other drama students at the University of Huddersfield in the summer of 2012. I did Hamlet's soliloquy from the end of Act 2, and Sir Patrick gave me some wonderful advice and very kind words. I have now used that monologue to successfully audition for drama school. Will you please say thank you for his help?
Oh, that is fantastic. I couldn't be more pleased. I'm Chancellor of the University of Huddersfield, and a few years ago they made me Professor of Performing Arts because I do work with the student actors and those who are studying theatre and performance arts whenever I can. So that's fantastic that he's had that success. Congratulations to him.
And I think we next see you reading Winston Churchill's diary for the Royal Albert Hall performance, Radio 2's part of the 70th DD anniversary.
That's right, and I am so much looking forward to that. I was thrilled to be asked to do that. I've been working in the United States for the past, United States and Canada for the past 12 months, and was planning to spend the summer here in the UK, and of course, the D-Day invasion is part of my life, and to be invited to be in this celebration and to be speaking some of the words of at the time, our coalition prime minister, our wartime prime minister, is so exciting to me.
And after that, do we see you next in Match, I think, which has just opened at the Tribeca?
Yes, a movie that I made in Brooklyn, New York, about 15 months ago. A very small independent movie in which I play a classical ballet teacher at the Juilliard School in Manhattan, who is interviewed by 2 young people about ostensibly classical ballet, but it turns out the interview is about something else entirely different. That was seen at Tribeca, and it did very well, I'm glad to say. And there will be a release shortly. And then we've just announced something that has been as exciting as anything for me in many years. Seth MacFarlane and Jonathan Ames are producing and writing a new half-hour comedy series about an Englishman in Los Angeles who has a very successful talk show, although his numbers are slipping when we meet him at the beginning, a man called Walter Blunt, and the show is called Blunt Talk, and we will start filming that this autumn.
And Seth MacFarlane's going to be on the show very shortly. We'll talk to him about that. So, Patrick, thank you very much indeed. I'm glad I got through the interview without coughing, and I appreciate your time with us today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Simon.
Thank you.